Final Fantasy VIII had a lot to live up to, and it ended up being a little bit divisive between fans. I love this game. I think it's excellent, but I can openly admit there's so many things that'll turn players off this game. The draw system can be a chore, and you're punished for using up your supplies of magic. Enemies scale to your level, which defeats the purpose of leveling up. Systems are difficult to learn when starting out. And I've even got some small criticisms with the story. But it's rare I can still thoroughly love a game so much, despite what seems like some pretty big flaws in its design. It had only been about 2 short years since Final Fantasy VII was released, and blew my mind. And with winter 1999, you can bet Final Fantasy VIII was at the very top of my Christmas list. Christmas could not come fast enough that year.
This fall, the most anticipated action-adventure of the year.
I remember being in the living room excited and telling my family, that's the game I want, when the advert for Final Fantasy VIII came on the TV. To keep me going till Christmas, I picked up a special edition of the official PlayStation magazine. It was all about Final Fantasy VIII with a retrospective for the entire Final Fantasy series. This was pretty cool because Europe didn't get all of the original releases. And what I really wanted was the playable demo of Final Fantasy VIII, and I played the heck out of this. It allowed you to play an early mission, and test a few summons like Bahamut, which aren't normally available until much later in the game. One of the most standout changes were the more detailed character models that were a pretty big step up from FF7's chibi style, and Squaresoft would continue to make use of pre-rendered backgrounds that still looked amazing for their time. The demo suggested a world of conflict and strong themes of war, quite a bit more dark and realistic, but the world was still sprinkled with classic Final Fantasy elements like returning monsters, chocobos, and summons. They all made me feel at home. So, this world is made up of 3 gardens: Balamb, Galbadia, and Trabia. They're almost like military-based universities that educate, train, and test students so that they'll graduate as seeds. And yes, metaphorically the gardens produce seeds, and they have one ultimate objective: to destroy sorceresses, the antagonists of this universe. The story starts in Balamb Garden, with our protagonists Squall and Cypher brutally dueling each other for training in the form of a cinematic. Squaresoft somehow managed to raise the bar for cinematics even higher, with a step up in terms of detail and animations from the previous Final Fantasy. Cinematics were more alive and action-packed with massive battles and events to come later. Our main character Squall is a student at Balamb Garden, and he's on his way into becoming a seed. This is the first time we see a gunblade across the Final Fantasy universes. Gunblades can't shoot long range, they're fired whilst slashing up enemies to enhance attacks, and this becomes a feature in combat. You can press R1 to shoot as you strike an enemy, and if you time it right, there will be explosive extra damage. It's a neat little feature that makes the regular JRPG turn-based battles a tiny bit more interactive and exciting. Squall is often disliked or criticised as a character for his emo, cold and apathetic attitude towards others. But throughout the story of FF8, we see him develop as a character. We can also hear his inner thoughts and learn where his insecurities come from. He was an orphan who lost his family and then loses someone he considered to be his big sister. This results in a protagonist who's afraid to connect and communicate with others, fearing he'll lose them too. Squall isn't some overpowered Superman or always in the right perfect protagonist. Hell, the opening cinematic rushes him to the infirmary and leaves him with a massive scar across his face. This guy gets trialed and tested, often put in situations completely out of his comfort zone or depth. He has a hard time expressing his feelings, and he has his fair share of failures. Squall is written as a realistic and possibly relatable teenager with flaws and issues, and we get to see him develop as a person. His big weakness would be his connections to others. While the crew of FF8 help him open up and develop, in the long run, when it matters the most, his connections to others still aren't quite strong enough, which leads to his defeat. It's other characters that have to rescue him and save the day. I honestly see Squall as a pretty brilliant character by the end of the story. I can't say the rest of the crew develop quite as much, but more on them later. It's really atmospheric starting the game as a student in Balamb Garden, with bustling students and lessons taking place in lecture rooms. I want to say Garden is like a more military-based Hogwarts, with different houses, and students are actually trained in magic, but Garden is a lot more combat-focused, gritty and badass. Something that really stands out is the attention to detail in the world and environments. You can interact with objects like the main map directory, or computers in lecture rooms, and explore Balamb's events, news or tutorials. Today is exam day and you'll be combat tested against the Summon Ifrit, and that's within his cavern with the help of your instructor. Played this mission for the first time on Christmas morning, and if you were worried that Final Fantasy VIII takes the series in a completely different direction with its realism, this mission sets the tone and is here to reassure you this is a classic Final Fantasy game from start to finish. The classical Summon Ifrit himself even reacts to you summoning Shiva and using his elemental weakness against him. A really nice little bit of flavouring to the fight. Summons in this world are technically called Guardian Forces, or GFs. This might just be the best iteration of Final Fantasy summons out there, because these Guardian Forces are a critical foundation to FF8's gameplay and systems. Not only can you summon mythical beings for help, you'll be blown away by visually impressive over-the-top powerful attacks, and you can junction GFs into your characters to enhance their powers or make use of special abilities and passives unique to each Guardian Force. Guardian Forces would have to be my most favourite feature. Throughout the game there's loads of GFs to earn, not to mention Final Fantasy VIII brought new, unique summons to the series, including the Minotaur brothers and my personal favourite new addition, Diablos, the Dark Lord of gravity-based magic. Some GFs you can earn from bosses, some from optional dungeons and trials off the beaten path, and some are hidden away at the ends of the planet, like Doom Train. This spooky ghost train is poison based and requires you to pay close attention to clues hidden in Oculate magazines to learn how to perform the ritual to summon this GF. Discovery and exploration is rewarded, and there's no better reward than access to an entirely new Guardian Force. So when GFs are junctioned into one of your party members, you can allocate your stockpiles of magic to enhance a character's attributes and effects. Bear with me, it's a little bit complicated, but for example, the Siren GF, which allows you to assign sleep magic to your attacks, meaning you'll put enemies to sleep as an extra effect when you attack. Pretty effective strategy throughout the game. You could also use Siren's ability to convert items like store-bought medicines into powerful healing magic, then with the brothers' abilities connect that healing magic to your characters for a big health boost. I used to enjoy Quetzalcoatl's abilities to transform weakened monsters into collectible cards. Then using the card mod ability, we could turn cards into useful items. We could then go one step further and refine those items into powerful magic using other Guardian Forces. Again, experimentation is rewarded. It gets much more complex and deeper as you play. These examples just scratch the surface. Final Fantasy VIII is a very systems heavy game. A side effect to this is when starting out it's quite difficult to understand all the elements of the junction system. I know as a 9-year-old kid the complicated systems just flew right over my head, and I had a lot of trouble with the combat till I stepped back and took the time to figure it out. It doesn't help that very early on in the game you receive tons of chunky tutorials back to back. It was quite difficult taking them all in and understanding them. And as you play with different parties of characters, you have to swap junctions around quite often, and it can be a bit of a juggling act. Sometimes you'll enter combat after swapping party members and be missing abilities because you completely forgot to junction anything. But if you can grasp the junction and Guardian Force systems, maybe even gain a mastery over them, it makes combat incredibly satisfying because there's insane potential for customizing your characters in this game. I think growing up with Final Fantasy VIII helped shape my love for deep RPG customization and system-heavy games like the more modern Path of Exile. It's a pity no Final Fantasy game since has gone quite as in-depth with its customization and progression systems. Instead, systems have become less and less complex and more bare bones to make future games for a more accessible audience. There was a lot of experimental game design within Final Fantasy VIII. The junction system was achieved through a lot of trial and error from the devs. The PlayStation 1 was an era where big games were allowed to experiment and go crazy. One other big change to the classic FF formula was how you earned money or gil. It no longer drops directly from monsters anymore. You could get a little bit from selling items dropped by monsters, but the majority of your income now came from your wages as a seed. The salary system was a mix of good and bad. You'd receive your salary at regular intervals based on how many steps you've taken in-game. And what was really cool? Your wages were determined by your seed rank, and every little action or mistake throughout the game can raise or lower your rank, adding a veiled layer of agency to the entire game's story and missions. Say for example, breaking the garden's rules and showing off your magic in the hallways, or successfully completing missions efficiently with lots of time to spare might get you a promotion or demoted. You could even opt to take written exams to boost up your rank, but the exams contain very specific questions on game systems and combat. They'd very quickly become a chore. Back in the day, you could pull out your trusty magazines or cheat books, and they'd have the exam answers for some easy rank ups. So, what about your crew in Final Fantasy VIII? Throughout the story, you'll be accompanied by your fellow Seed friends. As individuals, they have a few developments, but not quite as many as I would have liked to have seen. I'm gonna do a quick rundown of the cast. Zell is a hot-headed martial artist and close with his adopted family. There's a series of optional side quests where Zell and a librarian end up getting together, but girlfriends aside, he also has a deep love for hot dogs. Selphie can get very excited and runs Balm Garden's events. You can read her thoughts and open diary on her website and a computer terminal throughout the game. She's recently transferred from Trabia Garden. She has to overcome the deaths of her friends there. You know, I think Selphie is the character that's grown on me the most over time. I can really appreciate her constant high energy, especially compared to our protagonist. While Irvine's always struggled with loneliness, he's recruited from Galbadia Garden as an expert marksman to assassinate the sorceress. But in the moment he seems to have some kind of anxiety or panic attack and chokes up. It wasn't until future playthroughs I realised that Irvine is choking up because he's the only character that recognises the sorceress's identity. It's also strongly implied that Selphie and Irvine fall in love and get together. Quistis is our resident blue mage who can use special abilities that she's learned from monsters. She's a genius, in fact the youngest instructor in Garden, with her own fan club. Early on she believes she has feelings for Squall, but it's later discovered to be misunderstood love. Rinoa is a doggy lover and part of a resistance group, the Forest Owls, who are rebelling against Galbadia and the sorceress in control. The Forest Owls end up hiring Seeds to help, which opens up the crazy world of war and sorceresses to Rinoa. Being the only party member who isn't a trained Seed, her insecurities come to the surface about not being strong enough, especially after being in some helpless situations. She also becomes the main love interest of our protagonist Squall. Common trend throughout our cast are the romances and love interests. Final Fantasy VIII tackles a few different themes, but love itself is the main theme. It's represented in the game's logo itself, with Squall and Rinoa hugging. Starting from meeting under a shooting star, Rinoa helps Squall open up, and the slowly building relationship between the two of them is the core of the story which everything ends up revolving around. It's a little bit into the story that we learn all of our Seeds actually grew up in the same orphanage, along with Squall's lost step-adopted sister Elone. Turns out most of our characters completely forgot about their childhood, and that's because of the Guardian forces we use. GFs provide power at the cost of our memories slowly being eaten away. The story does foreshadow and hint at this multiple times, but even still I've always found this plot point a bit hard to swallow. It just feels a bit unbelievable that everyone forgot that they were in the same orphanage, which is pretty ironic in a world with dragons and mythical beasts. But the fact our characters shared this orphanage is an important plot point. It's no coincidence that the game's opening music, Libere Fatali, means fated children in Latin. The orphanage is a central focus point for our fated orphans, and the matron of the orphanage, Adia, just happens to become the sorceress and antagonist. Okay, story and characters aside for the moment, Final Fantasy VIII was originally released on the PlayStation in 1999, universally praised for its jaw-dropping visuals. It got a PC release the following year. 20 years later we get a remastered version of the game. Most of the footage I've shown will be from the remastered version, but it still leaves a lot to be desired as a remaster and has been negatively panned. The main feature of the remaster would be the enhanced character models. They do legitimately look good. Characters, monsters, summons, and any game objects like trains have been vastly improved, with more pixels and higher resolution textures. The problem is that that's pretty much the only thing the remaster improves. Pre-rendered backgrounds are still over 20 years old, and there's a jarring difference between character models and background art. In Daling City, some of the citizens are part of the background and look awful next to other character models, breaking the immersion and visual consistency. While in combat we've got much better looking character models and textures, but they still have the same number of frames in their animations as the PlayStation 1 version, and it just makes it feel wrong and extra jerky. I've had a long list of problems, frame rate issues I could only resolve by modding the game. Pocket Station functionality has been removed, music cuts out more abruptly, and they've keybound boosts to controls by default, so I'd keep accidentally turning on an invincibility boost whenever I'd knock R3 on the controller. Never really noticed it before, but Cypher wears his pants so high up, I thought it was changed in the remaster, but it turns out it was just that way in the original too. Those are some pretty big pants. I thought maybe Square Enix could be excused from the lack of remastered backgrounds. Maybe they're impossible to change without rebuilding the entire game. But unpaid modders have finished Final Fantasy VIII Remastered and made mods to improve the backgrounds. If you can mod the remastered version of the game like this would probably be the best way of playing the game. But the biggest sin of all are the remastered Triple Triad card designs. For some reason in the remastered version of the game, Square Enix have decided to recreate a lot of the card art, and they've done a real amateur job, ruining some of the original card designs with pictures of 3D models and a terrible misuse of negative space. Some monsters have rough edges or blue outlines, as if they've been poorly photoshopped out of the game. That reminds me, I've nearly forgot to talk about one of the most important elements of Final Fantasy VIII, Triple Triad. Surprisingly, this in-game card game is so good, you could easily just scrap the rest of Final Fantasy VIII and spend hundreds of hours collecting cards and battling strangers across the world instead. It's addictive enough trying to complete the collection, but as I mentioned earlier, using the Guardian Force Quetzalcoatl, you can also turn cards into rare items, then go a step further with another GF and refine these items into medicine, powerful magic reserves, or crafting materials for ultimate weapons. It makes Triple Triad very rewarding, and an alternative method to progressing and powering up your RPG characters. Triple Triad starts out as a very basic card game. Each card has 4 numbers, one for each cardinal direction. You simply play a card in a 3x3 grid and try to flip over adjacent cards by having a higher number in that direction. Simple. Triple Triad would have to be my most favourite minigame across all Final Fantasies. That's saying a lot because there's tons of great minigames. G-Bike, Chocobo Racing, Chocobo Hot and Cold, and Blitzball. But Triple Triad was considered so successful, became its own standalone game on mobiles, and it was later fully integrated into the online Final Fantasy XIV. But there is one commonly disliked feature among fans, and that's the extra rules of Triple Triad. As you travel the world of FF8, you'll discover different regions play Triple Triad with different rules, and once you've spread these rules, it's difficult to remove them. Most rules are fine, like the same rule allows you to flip bonus cards if 2 numbers match on adjacent cards. But there's one rule I really don't like: random. The random rule doesn't allow you to pick what 5 cards you're going to play with. Instead of your 5 strongest level 9 or 10 cards, you could end up with 5 really weak level 1 cards. It's all random. My way of getting around this rule was saving the game before every card game, and reloading if I lost, which could be a bit of a chore. But even with the extra rules, Triple Triad is fantastic, and I wish more single-player RPGs included their own in-game card game. The Witcher 3's Gwent card game was also a big hit. I'm surprised more games don't follow suit. Final Fantasy VIII also has its own iteration of your traditional chocobo catching and riding. There's a few limited treasures to find with them, but if you had a Pocket Station or the original Steam version of the game, you could use your chocobo to play Chocobo World. It's a very basic game where you could battle monsters and auto-explore for treasure. You'd then connect your Pocket Station into the PlayStation memory card slot and transfer your rewards into your Final Fantasy VIII world. It was a very cool concept similar to the Dreamcast controller screens, but sadly Pocket Stations never actually came to Europe. I never actually got to play Chocobo World until the Steam release of Final Fantasy VIII, which came with its own Pocket Station emulation. It's more of a cool gimmick. Chocobo World mostly plays itself and it's not necessary to complete Final Fantasy VIII, but you can get some pretty helpful items from it. There's a few crazy side quests involving friendly aliens and the mystery around Obel Lake, But there aren't that many other minigames, especially when compared with Final Fantasy VII's Gold Saucer, an amusement park filled with fun things to do and plenty of rewards. What FF8 lacks in quantity, it makes up for in quality. Triple Triad is my most favourite of all Final Fantasy minigames. I've sunk hundreds of hours to listening to its theme, Shuffle or Boogie, and completing my card collection. There's not a Final Fantasy game in existence where I don't enjoy the soundtrack. FF8's music is a bit more unique and memorable to the usual fantasy tones. There's a few standout pieces I especially loved. The relaxing ambience of Fisherman's Horizon, the epicness of the general battle theme, Don't Be Afraid, and my most favourite piece would be the man with the machine gun. It's like nothing else in the Final Fantasy universe. This is the popular theme for the machine gun wielding Laguna and his wacky adventures with his crew of Kairos and Ward. Laguna being Squall's lost father, and the polar opposite in personality with lots of charisma, he's a fan favourite. We learn of Laguna's past through the help of Alone, and in parallel with the main story with Squall. While Laguna deals with Sorceress Adel, Squall deals with Sorceress Edea. Where it gets interesting is Laguna originally has a massive crush on pianist and singer Julia. Julia sings one of the game's core pieces of music, Eyes on Me, a love song all about her experiences and love for Laguna. But the romance never happens. Laguna ends up elsewhere and marries a girl called Rain instead. He looks after his step-adopted daughter Alone and eventually has Squall with his wife Rain. Meanwhile, Julia ends up with General Caraway and has Renoa. While Laguna never got to be with Julia, it's poetic that children ended up falling in love by coincidence. Julia's song Eyes on Me even plays when Squall and Renoa are together, a nice little touch that's not rammed in your face and a very subtle story point. And this is where I would have liked to have shown a bit of the music in game, but it gets instantly copyrighted, so I've had to remove it. Sorry about that. When I was younger, I never really cared for the vocal music piece Eyes on Me, but when you fully understand the lyrics and the story behind it, there's powerful meanings behind the words. We learn about Laguna's story through Squall's step-adopted sister, Alone. It turns out Alone has special powers. She can junction people's minds together to allow them to view the past. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it, and Alone wants to reconnect Squall with his long-lost father, Laguna, by showing us his past throughout the story. Her abilities make her a prime target for the sorceresses. She has such unusual powers you think she might even be a sorceress, but she's not. Unlike the sorceresses who inherited their powers from the god Hein, Alone's powers are just a mystery and never truly explained. Seifer is another character I've not got into yet either. He's another child from the same orphanage as our heroes, but he's a bit of a bully that ends up joining the current sorceress and becoming her knight. He's manipulated into bringing about war through Galbadia and its garden. Seifer takes more of a rival role than the antagonist's role, but is Seifer a good rival? As Squall's rival, Seifer coincidentally mirrors a lot of his actions. Seifer himself isn't completely evil, and he hints of his passions and a romantic dream of being a knight. Clothing-wise, he even takes on the themes and emblem of the cross of a Knight of St. James. But Seifer has got issues, which is understandable for any orphan child that's lost their family. In the game, he's described as a problem child, and the sorceress exploits this and manipulates Seifer into being her knight. There's a powerful guardian force based on Norse mythology, Odin, who rides a six-legged horse. Props to Squaresoft for actually giving the horse 6 legs in FF8, sometimes they skip that little detail. You can't control or junction Odin into your characters like a normal guardian force, but once you've earned Odin's help through his own trials, he will randomly appear every now and then to slice your enemies in half, causing instant death with Zantetsuken. Why have I derailed into talking about Odin? Well, in the final encounter with Seifer, if you have access to Odin, he'll automatically appear to slice up and kill Seifer. This tiny little detail is one of my personal favourite moments. As usual, I expected Odin to instantly kill Cypher, but I get my expectations subverted, showing just how powerful Cypher really is. While love is the main theme of the game, war is explored as a secondary theme. It's because of a war before our hero's time, the Sorceress War, that our characters end up spending their childhood in the same orphanage. Now, under a new sorceress, Cypher leads Galbadia to war, and after Trabia Garden is laid to waste, it's Balamb Garden's turn. We get some pretty incredible cinematics of the two gardens battling it out. The visuals were almost unbelievable on your PlayStation 1 at the time. As Cypher leads Galbadia, Squall has ended up in the position of leader of Balamb Garden. Feels like there's a lot of agency behind your actions and choices, but events will mostly fold out the same. Nonetheless, this is one of the most epic moments in the game, and you'll defend students from Galbadia and its advanced technology. Ultimately, Cypher and the sorceress Edea are defeated in a climactic fight. And personally, I find this is where the story peaks, but this is only the end of Disc 2 of 4. And I do still think the rest of the story is great, but not quite as good. With the sorceress defeated, her powers end up transferred into Rinoa, putting her into a coma. This is where we really notice a transformation within Squall, as he comes to terms that he's been falling in love with Rinoa. He takes her to the advanced city of Esther to hopefully heal her, and Squall does what he does best and tries to save her all alone. And things get crazy as he ends up risking it all to leap into space and save her. It's quite late into the story that we discover the true antagonist, Sorceress Ultimecia, who exists at the end of time and has been possessing other sorceresses across time. And this is where the third theme of Final Fantasy VIII comes in, time. Ultimecia's goal is to find Squall's big sis alone, and with her abilities combined with hers, merge past, present and future together in time compression, where she'll become a god. Throughout the story we see our main antagonist Ultimecia act through possessing other sorceresses, and we may get glimpses of her, but it's only at the very end of the game that we get to properly see her. She's a bit of a late bloomer of a villain. I wish we got to see a little bit more of her past and what drove her desire to destroy existence with time compression. We might have understood her a bit better if she was set up as the primary villain from the start of the game. To battle Ultimecia, we'll need to travel through time with the help of Ellone and Laguna. Our party needs to make an anchor point in the world, somewhere important to everyone. This is where our character's shared childhood in the orphanage comes into play. And from there we arrive at Ultimecia's castle, which serves as a classical Final Fantasy endgame zone with trials, challenges, treasures to find and bosses to overcome. There's a nice little twist here that all your powers are sealed away, and every boss you defeat unlocks one of your powers. You have the agency to fight Ultimecia early, or you can take the time to unlock each and every one of your powers to give you the best fighting chance. In fact, once you've retrieved the Ragnarok from space, you can fly across the world. A lot of new optional endgame content opens up, like the chance to battle and obtain the ridiculous Jumbo Cactuar Guardian Force, or you can complete the trials within the Deep Sea Research Centre hidden near the edge of the map. And being rewarded with even more new Guardian Forces with new abilities continues to be super satisfying. If you're up for a real challenge, there's the optional super boss or mega weapon, a true test of your mastery over the Junctions and Guardian Force systems. This monster can easily wipe out your entire team in one turn. My general strategy would be to make use of all the rare items you've saved up like hero drinks, which temporarily make your party members invincible, and send this boss to hell while pumping out as much damage as fast as possible with limit breaks. There isn't much point in leveling up your characters to help prepare for any challenges or the big final encounters with Ultimecia, and that's because enemies scale to your character's level. From a game design stance I can see why they've experimented with this idea. It keeps encounters challenging and at your level, but it also completely defeats the point in leveling up, which kind of sucks in an RPG. You're actually better off not leveling up and battling lower level bosses. Square Enix even acknowledged this, because the original Steam version of FF8 includes an achievement for beating the game with Squall still at his initial level. It's interesting how quite a few characters unintentionally mirror each other's actions. Squall mirrors Cypher, they have similar pasts, they both dated Rinoa, have similar scars, they both lead a garden to war, and while Squall becomes Rinoa's knight, Cypher becomes Ultimecia's knight. While Rinoa mirrors Ultimecia, they're both sorceresses, one dark, one light, and they've even got very similar facial structures. There's a lot of theories that Rinoa becomes Ultimecia, with lots of evidence in game, but that theory was shut down by the game's director, Yoshiniro Katas. When you are ready to finish off Ultimecia, you're treated to a spectacle of bosses back to back. Ultimecia even summons the strongest guardian force, Graiva. She creates Graiva from Squall's mind. Squall's always had a deep respect and admiration for lions and their strength and pride, and Ultimecia is going to use that against him. After a spectacle of out-of-this-world attacks, Ultimecia is finally defeated, but there's a rule with sorceresses that they need to pass on their powers before they die, or they'll suffer endlessly. Because our party used their childhood orphanage as their anchor point, their matron Edea ends up receiving the sorceress's powers in the past. It closes the loop in time travel with Final Fantasy VIII. We were ironically the ones that created our original antagonist, Sorceress Edea. I mentioned earlier, Squall's big weakness is his connection to others. He has a hard time expressing his feelings and difficulty with connecting with anyone, afraid he'll lose them in time. His issues stem from his insecurities as an orphan, who lost his family and then alone, his step-adopted sister. Ironically, to return everyone to our timeline after Ultimecia's defeat, love, friendship and courage are the key to successfully reuniting with everyone. And while Squall has developed as a person and even fallen in love throughout the course of the story, he's still not quite all the way there yet. He's defeated and lost to time. In his final moments, it's Rinoa who has to come in and save our protagonist. When the final cinematic plays, I always find the most emotional part is Squall's father, Laguna, reminiscing and visiting his wife's grave. We see him hugging Rain, mirroring how Squall and Rinoa hugged in the game's logo. It's no metaphorical coincidence that Balamb Garden and the seeds fly by, and the flower petals from the fields of flowers rise up into the atmosphere. We finally get to see our crew relax and goof around during the credits, and to be honest, I wish we got to see more of this kind of stuff from the side characters. Throughout the game we're on serious missions, at war with other nations, battling sorceresses, and we don't get to see our crew develop and personally connect with them quite as much as I would have liked. Time travel is always a messy component to get right in writing. Bear with me, but despite killing Sorceress Ultimecia, there's a bit of a time paradox. Edea inherits Ultimecia's powers in the past, and after this point a past version of Ultimecia is able to possess that Edea to bring about the story of Final Fantasy VIII. But technically, couldn't that past version of Ultimecia also still possess Rinoa at any point from here and cause more chaos? Ultimecia is able to possess Edea after her future defeat and time compression, so why not Rinoa as well? It's less further back in time. And when you get really in-depth and break down the time travel loop of the story, it kind of falls apart a bit. It would actually make more sense if the Rinoa becomes Ultimecia theory was true. Potential plot holes aside, hands down I do believe Final Fantasy VIII's story is miles better than most game stories these days. It comes from an era of Final Fantasy games where it feels like you're reading a really great book with an in-depth story. And in its time it was the first Final Fantasy to tackle the theme of love as such a key element to the storytelling, and I love this game. I always find it surprisingly fun replaying this RPG. I always enjoy the story and replaying big moments like the Battle of the Gardens, but gaining a mastery over the game's heavy systems makes gameplay and customization incredibly satisfying and rewarding. It's made for some very interesting speedrunning as well. Hunting down all the optional Guardian Forces takes the cake. From tackling the Tomb of the Unknown King for the goofy Minotaur brothers, battling your way through the Deep Sea Research Center for the powerful Bahamut and Eden, or tackling the early challenge of Diablos through Cid's magical lamp, Final Fantasy VIII completely nails the sense of accomplishment and reward within its gameplay loops. And that's what keeps me coming back time after time to replay this flawed fantasy masterpiece. I can acknowledge that there are flaws with this game's systems, like the draw system, monster level scaling, the complexity of the junction system. They may initially turn a lot of players off, but with a bit of experience and understanding, I find you can easily work around these systems. It's not ideal, but you don't want to miss out on what this game can offer. Can a masterpiece have flaws? Even the answer to that question is subjective. I consider this to be a pretty brilliant game of its time. Sure, I've got some nostalgia, but I can still play and enjoy the game today, and I still find parts emotional. You've got to bear in mind this level of storytelling with realistic themes like love, and Squall's social awkwardness and difficulties were quite rare in games in 1999. And I think Final Fantasy VIII is worth checking out today, or giving it another chance if you've struggled with it in the past. If you're still here, I'm thankful that you've made it this far into the video, and consider liking or subscribing for more content. That's been some of my thoughts and experiences with Final Fantasy VIII. Peace.